Good evening, everybody. My name is Ronald White. I'm an alcoholic. Get the thank yous out of the way. Kerry, wherever he is, thank you so much for arranging all of everything for me. Martin, for picking me up from the airport and treating me to lunch. Kent and Debbie, thank you for your hospitality, getting me here and keeping me there. And anybody who had any hand in having me here this evening. I have a sobriety date. It's July the 14th of 1986. About 3 weeks ago, I celebrated 40 years of sobriety. Don't clap, that takes up too much of my time. I have a home group. It's called the Never Too Early Big Book Workshop. We meet every Sunday morning, 9:30 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. We're on the online platform right now, about to go back hybrid for the first time since COVID had started. We're going to be live as well as online for the first time, doing both. That meeting has been started in November of 1987 in my mother's home. 13 alcoholics sitting around her kitchen table, taking a walk through the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous together. We now number, this morning we had about 420 people there. We average between 400 and 500 people who want this thing that we have. I have a sponsor. His name is Jerome. Jerome has a sponsor. I sponsor both men and women in Alcoholics Anonymous. Anybody who wants my help, I will say yes. And Alcoholics Anonymous has given me everything. So anytime Alcoholics calls for me, I am there. Another vital statistic is I'm 71 years old, so I only say that because I don't think I look 71. If I look 71, I wouldn't say it. So, but I really only say that to let you know some of the things I might talk about this evening may seem dated to some of you guys. Some of you guys might not even get the references because you might not even have been born yet. But just bear with me, y'all. I'll try to stay current. I'm going to talk about a lot of things in a short period of time, so just be patient with me. I won't go over the time. I always respect the group, and the group's, whatever the group says, I go along with that. I was born and raised in Los Angeles, California. Boy, you see, I'm 71. If I start there, we're in trouble. I'm from Los Angeles. I was born and raised in South Central Los Angeles. We called it Watts at the time I was born and raised there. I have 5 brothers. There's 6 boys in my family. 4 of us are sober members of Alcoholics Anonymous. You guys may have heard from my brother Ralph before. I have another brother named Reggie who has 9 years. My baby brother Rod has 37 or 38 years. December of 1987, he got sober. So however much time that is, he has. Reggie has 9 years. Alcoholics Anonymous saved not only my life, but my whole family's life. Saved my mother's life. My mother just passed away last November at the age of 95. My mother had almost died in 1985 when she was 55. Because of these leeches, these parasites she has raised as sons who had become alcoholics, who were basically sucking her lifeblood dry. Alcoholics Anonymous saved her for an additional 40 years as a result of this beautiful program. When I grew up, I never believed that I would be standing at a podium like this, sharing about being an alcoholic, because it was just the opposite of what I envisioned. My daddy was a drunk. We called them winos back in my day. He liked to drink a fine little vintage beverage called Ripple. I don't think Ripple ever saw a grape. Ripple twist top, no cork, right? Twist top. My daddy loved it. In fact, he loved it so much that my mother put him out when I was about 8 because he seemed to love it more than he loved us. He could never seem to make it home with a full paycheck. And we were poor as it was, and he couldn't bring home a dime. And so she thought she could raise 6 boys better by herself than with him, dragging us down. And so she did that. Alcohol never looked like an attractive thing to me. It looked like failure. It looked like abandonment. It looked like loss. And so I never dreamed about drinking or having any kind of envisioning becoming what I became. But I have learned since that alcohol don't care what you think, because as I grew up, I still had what I've come to know as the ism of alcoholism. If you read our book, Alcoholics Anonymous, there's a kind doctor who worked with our co-founder, Bill Wilson, Dr. William Duncan Silkworth. Dr. Silkworth wrote something in the front of our book called The Doctor's Opinion. He talked about how he had studied thousands of alcoholics, and he noticed some things about him. And one of the paragraphs, so beautifully written in his opinion, he said that they seemed to be irritable, restless, and discontented. This is the way I am when not drinking. Not when I'm drunk, it's when I'm not drinking. And I identified with feeling that long before I even touched alcohol. I have always felt different, apart from rather than a part of. Even among my 5 brothers, I'm the 3rd oldest. I'm right in the middle. Why among all 6 of us, I always felt like I was the shortest. Now I am. What just a feeling, right? But I've always felt I had little man's complex. I was measuring the podium as I was sitting back there trying to make sure you would be able to see me. I've always hated being so dark. I was measuring the lighting. I was wondering, will they be able to see me? Right? Because I've always hated, I didn't hate being black, but damn it, so black. I thought even black people discriminated against me. Right? I've always hated wearing glasses. I've worn glasses since the 2nd grade, and they call me those names. You guys know Poindexter, Mr. Peabody, the professor. I could go on with a litany of things that I hated about myself. I hated being little Ronnie White, being so weak, unable to play sports like the other boys, unable to talk to the girls because they were always taller than me. You might as well get the little violins out, y'all, because it's just like a pity party up here. That's the way that I felt. I felt that I was ugly. How could somebody as handsome as me ever? Anyway, it's another story, right? But it's amazing how our self-image, the perception we have of ourselves, is so skewed. It's so delusional. I like it's a word we use in our book. So I grow up wanting to be somebody other than Ronnie. I can't drink to change the way that I felt, so I escape in books. I become addicted to reading. Libraries become my sanctuary because when I would read, I would escape. And I loved adventure novels, spy novels, espionage. My family then purchased a little small black and white TV. I fall in love with television because it's even easier than the books. All you got to do is turn it on and it's fed to you. And they called me the human TV guide. I knew whatever was on television any time of the day, any day of the week. They would play a little game. Neighbors would come over, and Ralph or somebody was, I'm glued to the television. They say, hey man, watch this. Ronnie, Wednesday, 8:00, without moving. I say, oh, channel 2 is Gunsmoke. Channel 4 is Mannix. Channel 5 is Petticoat Junction. Channel 7 is Green Acres. Now I see the puzzled looks on the face. I told you I was going to tell you some things that are dated. Some of our older members might know that those are the shows that dominated television as I grew up. And I loved TV. There was one TV show I gravitated to that later became one of the guiding forces in my life. Some of you guys might remember this character. His name was Perry Mason. Perry Mason was a criminal defense attorney played by an actor named Raymond Burr. And I loved Perry Mason because Perry was always rescuing his client at the end of the episode, somebody on trial for murder. I say on trial, I don't think I ever saw a jury on Perry Mason. It was always at the prelim, right? When he was getting the case dismissed. Where are my criminals at? Where are my criminals? Don't raise your hands. I should have given y'all an advisement before. I know you in here without raising your hands. Okay? Y'all know it don't work like that in the real criminal justice system. But I thought that's the way it really worked. And I wanted to be Perry Mason because Perry wasn't like one of those people I saw in the comic books that I love so much. He didn't have to wear a cape or be invisible or have superhuman strength to save somebody. He was a real man. I could see him on the TV. And he would bend people's will to his simply by the force of his presence and his words. And I thought, maybe I could do that. So I grew up wanting to be Perry Mason. I wanted to be a lawyer. As I came through school, I was a straight A student at every class that I was in. I want to give you a recurring theme in my life. My brother Ralph is 1 year older than me chronologically. I have 88 more days sobriety than him. It's not a big deal. I just thought I'd drop that in here for the tape. But Ralph was always in the classroom right ahead of me. And Ralph is brilliant. He's one of he was like my hero as I grew up. He's the person, but try to walk in his shadow as I felt like I was doing. Everybody, all the teachers always, when I would come to their classroom, they would say, "Oh, you're Ralph's brother." Martin picked me up from the airport. "You're Ralph's brother." He don't know. I wanted to kick him right there, but he was driving. So anyway, I started thinking that was my name. I started wondering, are my accomplishments merely the residue of his success? It's the story of my life. I've always questioned every blessing that I've gotten. It's never felt like it's truly mine, even when I'm good at it. There was a TV show that came on back in the 70s. One of my sponsees say I should always drop this into one of my pictures, so I'll just say it. The show was called Soul Train. Now, Soul Train was what we call the Black American Bandstand. And I danced on the first 2 seasons of Soul Train, right? Yeah. And even while I'm dancing on Soul Train on national television, I still think I'm less than, because if you know anything about Soul Train, they have a stage in the middle of a platform in the middle of the stage where the musical acts perform. And I was always behind the stage dancing rather than in front where the cameras would see. Now, nobody relegated me to the back. Fear relegated me to the back because I was afraid that if I was in front, would I dance as well as the other people around me? And so I go through life wondering, am I good enough? But I'm the person that doesn't try. I was a member of a very prestigious band, a music program in South Central, one of the top programs in the nation, actually, at the time for high school bands. And I played trombone, and I was in the symphonic band, the orchestral band, the jazz band, the marching band. We marched in the Rose Parade on New Year's Day in Pasadena. I was in the front rank of the band because that's where they put the trombones, because we looked so flashy and everything. And I was always, anybody ever play in a musical, a band or anything? In the band, they always have each section are divided by chairs. And the first chair in the trombones is the best trombonist. Then you have second chair, third, all the way on down. We had about 10 trombonists. I was always second chair. And it was always some girl, one of those Shivers. Rachel Shivers, Naomi Shivers, right? What are girls playing trombones anyway, right? And first chair. And I was always, here I go again, relegated to second chair. All you have to do to be first chair is challenge first chair to play a sheet of music. And if you play better, you get first chair. I never challenged. Because you see, fear made me be so afraid of failing, I don't even try. And mind you, there are 8 other trombonists behind me. I'm second chair. I should be happy about that, right? I'm good. I was a great trombone player, but I never felt it because I'm not first chair. I so identify with our founder, Bill Wilson, because Bill Wilson talks about needing to be the number one boy, always needing to feel normal by being special. That's the way I felt. I don't know if I'm the only one in here who had a low sense of self-esteem, but a high opinion of themselves. It's me. I come through school and I get a full scholarship to go to college because of my grades, my academic prowess. I get accepted to a private college in Los Angeles called Loyola University. It's now called Loyola Marymount University, a private Catholic school run by the Jesuits. Very few people are getting accepted to Loyola because it's elite. But I'm mad because I don't get accepted to go to UCLA, coincidentally, where Ralph is. Because as much as I resent him, I love him and I want to follow him. I don't know if there's anybody else who's schizophrenic like that, right? You know, who the very thing I don't like is what I desire. So the summer before I start college, I won't say I get introduced to alcohol because I've known alcohol. It was when I took my first drink. I take the first drink because I'm tired of being the shell of I won't even call it a man yet, but the shell of a person who has been lying to all of his friends about getting together with a girl and being, you know, conversant with a girl. Conversant, y'all hear the way I'm trying to put it, you know, that I've had sex. Which I hadn't, right? You know, and I've been pretending, and it looked like everybody else has, except me. I'm tired, y'all. I'm tired of it because fear had been gripping me so long that finally I decided to try the thing that seemed to make people relax, that seemed to make people act a little bit more aggressive. So I drank. I drink cheap wine, just like my daddy used to drink. I don't make the connection at the time because I'm different than him. I think that my daddy wasn't as smart as me. He was a high school dropout. Now, I don't know this. I just think this because he left when I was 8. I don't know anything about his background. Anybody else ever make up facts? You know, don't let the truth get in the way. So I think he's a high school dropout. And so I think I'm smarter than him. I won't become him. My daddy was a janitor, a custodian. There's nothing wrong with that. But with my elitist self, I'm going to be the next Perry Mason. I'm better than him. My ego told me that I could drink and I'll never become him. And so I drank. Probably only another alcoholic will truly understand the effect produced in me by alcohol. I know that alcohol affects everybody in different ways. Even non-alcoholics, alcohol affects them, but not in the way that it affects folks like us. In me, it seems like the effect is electric, that it's exaggerated, that there's something about it. When I drank, it felt like I just got taller. That when I drank, I just got cooler. That when I drank, there's a woman in Alcoholics Anonymous that has a saying, and I've stole it from her. She says when she drank, she felt wittier, prettier, and tittier. I say, yes, that's me, right? You know, and alcohol saved me. Alcohol saved me from my neurotic, frightened, insecure self. And now I'm on a college campus and I'm living, y'all. I become the president of the Black Students Freedom Alliance. We're going to the beer bus and the panty raids. We're streaking. Well, I'm not streaking. I didn't want to show off, you know. But I need to let y'all know I felt a part of life at last because of drinking. However, in Bill's story, Bill says that this combination of drinking and speculation, drinking and thinking were forged to make a weapon that would later turn like a boomerang. One of those things he invented, right? It would turn around like a boomerang and cut him to pieces. The thing that saved me after a while, see, if you're a non-alcoholic, you can drink and you can do whatever, but see, unfortunately for me, I suffer from an illness that is progressive. While it might be just fun, I might be the moderate drinker, as the book said in the beginning. After a while, I become the continuous hard drinker. I only drank on weekends. I never drank on school nights because I wanted to preserve my scholarship and I wanted to be able to have great grades to go to law school. So first year, I stuck to that. Second year, I started feeling a little cocky. You know, I was like, yeah. You know, I think I got this. So now Thursday becomes pre-Friday. Monday becomes post-Sunday. Wednesday is hump day, right? You know, now I'm drinking every day. I'm adding some of those non-AA approved substances, right, to my drinking. And now I am on fire, y'all. And alcohol starts doing some things to me around my third year. I start missing some first period because I've been up all night drinking and carousing. I'm lying to the professors about the reason I'm doing. Relatives are just dying off like flies, you know. I was hoping the professors weren't communicating with each other. I start cheating on my exams. Hell, I start plagiarizing my term papers. The things that I used to look down on others for doing, now I'm doing, but I'm justifying it. The way I justify it is, it's the professor's fault. Why they got to schedule all these exams? We know the material. Why don't we just have a midterm and a final? Why do they want all these papers? This stuff is culturally biased anyway. I need to let you know, I had every excuse for why my grades were in jeopardy and why I had to cheat, rather than it's the drinking and the carousing that I'm doing that's causing that to go down. And I'm still passing my classes, and I graduate from college on time in 4 years. I get accepted to go to law school, a law school in San Francisco, Hastings College of the Law. I move up to the Bay Area. When I went to Hastings, I was introduced to a white powdery substance. That's the way they describe it in police report. And I combine that with my drinking, and I literally speed through law school. I go to summer school after first and second year. I'm a law clerk for a guy who has a motto. He says, Ronald, in this law firm, we work hard and we play hard. And that was right up my alley. And he became my first sponsor, because he taught me how to be a lawyer and how to live that life, that fast life. And after going to summer school after first and second year, I graduate from law school early in 2.5 years. I'm 23 years old, just before my 24th birthday in December of 1978. They got a test you got to take to be a lawyer called the bar exam. They're giving one in February of 79. My graduation isn't until May. I stay in San Francisco because I want to walk across the stage with my classmates finishing out school. And the bar results come out on the same day as my graduation. And I learned, even before I walk across the stage, I have passed the bar. And at age 24, I became one of the youngest Black attorneys ever licensed to practice law in the state of California. And I knew I was a genius. I'm a boy wonder. I'm going to be a millionaire by the time I'm 30. I know by the time I was 30, I didn't even have a bank account. Because you see, I'm an alcoholic. By the time I was 30, I didn't have a mansion, a condominium, or a house on the hill. I was homeless. Well, I wasn't on the streets homeless. I was living at my mother's house homeless. Because if you grown living with your mama and you ain't paying rent, you're homeless. That's her house. That ain't your house. I didn't have a job for a law firm on Wilshire and Westwood. The only job I had was carrying out the trash and watering the lawn for a 21-year-old dope dealer who lived across the street from my mother's house. I cannot even imagine the shame and degradation she must have felt looking at this son she had just been so proud of just 6 years before. And here I am, virtually prostituting myself to this youngster in her neighborhood in front of her friends and neighbors. You see, alcohol is no respecter of intellect. Alcohol doesn't care if you graduated from law school or if you dropped out from high school. Alcohol does not care if you grew up in Westwood or in Watts. Alcohol does not care if you're a man or if you're a woman. Alcohol doesn't care if you're short or if you're tall. Alcohol is an equal opportunity ass kicker. If you suffer from the disease that I suffer from, that is first of all physical in nature, I kind of described a little bit of it, but let me tell you what happens to Ronald when I have one. That one wants one. And that next one wants one more than the previous one. There is a craving that takes place in my body that is indescribable to anyone who's never felt it. It is unbelievable. I will do things in pursuit of the next one that I would never do for the first one. But let me get the first one in me. You better get out of my way. I was stealing the food out of my mother's refrigerator to cook plates for people around the neighborhood so I could get the next one. This is a mother who raised me and my brothers by herself, working as a domestic, cooking and cleaning for other people's families to keep food on our table. The mother who had us in church every Sunday, who introduced us to God. This woman who supported our education, put 3 sons into college when nobody from the neighborhood had ever even been to college before. The woman who went to night school, get a high school diploma, gets her AA degree. That's funny, an AA degree. She gets a bachelor's degree. She begins working for a major insurance company, Prudential Insurance Company. They gave her a gold watch before she retired. They loved her so much. I stole that watch. See, the craving knows nothing about loyalty, love, honor. That's not the worst part of my illness, though, because the solution is simple. Once you've lost a job with the Olympic Committee of Los Angeles, Ronald, when you were supposed to get free tickets to all the events and you steal money from them and you lose that, that was 1984. I drank another 2 years after that. Once I run through a job with a major entertainer where I was in her legal consulting firm, and we're going all over the country. We're the opening act for this artist called Rick James at his Super Freak tour at the Houston Astrodome. I can go over and over all the things that I've lost as the result of drinking, but my mind will not accept that it's the alcohol that's doing it. You see, there's a subtle form of insanity that accompanies this illness that won't allow me to give truth to what the real problem is. The world is the problem. Alcohol is the solution. Remember, that's the thing that saved me. And my brain won't accept that it's the thing that's taking everything from me. Until finally, on July the 13th of 1986, operating off that delusional behavior, that obsession, that this time it'll be different. And the craving which took place. I steal some money from a guy, a very dangerous man who lived a few doors down from my mother. And I had a bright idea. I said, if I tell him I don't have his money in my mother's house, he won't do anything to me because he respects my mother. So I take this wolf in my mother's house. I'm mindful of her welfare. And I'm explaining to him, I say, I'm sorry I don't have your money, Kenny, but he says, Ronnie, it's fine. We can make credit arrangements. Why don't we just step out on the porch? I didn't get the memo. He stepped out on the porch first. I stepped out after him, looking back with my cowardly self, making sure my mother was within eyesight. She didn't know what we were talking about, but she made me feel safe. And when I stepped on that porch, man, he let me have it. And he must have hit me as hard as he possibly could. And I found myself lying in my mother's front yard being kicked and stomped with this guy trying to kill me. As he was doing this, I felt as if I were removed from my body watching this happen. And Mama walked out on the porch. And I expected her to say, stop, stop, that's my baby. But Mama says nothing. And I look back at him and he's still kicking me and stomping me. And I look back at Mama and Mama turns around and she walks back in the house and she closes the door. Now, my mother is not heartless. My mother was not, she's the most loving, compassionate person that I ever knew. I was an asthmatic child. I would have asthma attacks, and we didn't have inhalers back in my day. We would have to be rushed. I would have to be rushed to the hospital where my mother would sit vigil next to a bed where they put a tent, pumping oxygen in to keep me alive. And my mother would sit for hours next to that tent with her hand snaked underneath to hold my little hand so I would know I wasn't alone. And this is the woman who just left me. And in that moment, I finally saw myself as I truly had become. A moment of clarity, we call it. When God paralyzes the liar in me long enough for me to see the truth. Grace. The next day, I went to a recovery home, a place called the Salvation Army Harbor Light Center. It was located on what we in Los Angeles call the Nickel, 5th Street. In the middle of Skid Row, the most squalid part of Los Angeles. I had never drank on Skid Row, but that's where I went to get sober. And they saved me. Not just by giving me a bed and some meals, there was an H&I panel of Alcoholics Anonymous bringing meetings to that facility. I will trumpet H&I for as long as I live because those are the men and women that toil without without any thought of the inconvenience it is sometimes for them. And they come out on Skid Row on a Friday night to bring a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. And those meetings saved me. You guys made Alcoholics Anonymous look attractive to me because they told stories like I'm telling tonight, and they didn't look like their stories. And they told me about they were now husbands and mothers, and that they were now members in their community that were respected. They told me about the things they were doing, and they were laughing. And I hadn't laughed in a long time, and I wanted what they had. And I fell in love with the fellowship before I fell in love with the program. I started catching a van that the recovery home would take to outside meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous. I started catching a bus to what later became my home group, a group called 9604 South Figueroa. Now, I got in the middle of the fellowship. I went to all the dances. I went to the picnics. I went to the conventions. And my arrogance around my 10th or 15th year in Alcoholics Anonymous, I started saying, that ain't AA. Those dances don't keep you. That's the fellowship. That's what made me know you can live sober and have fun. That I would see the kids at the picnics. I saw families back together again. They gave me hope. Until I finally, a year later, I got hungry for the program. Everybody doesn't last that long. I would advise you to get into our book, Alcoholics Anonymous, because that's where our program of recovery, those 12 steps are in there. And I was connected to the power. After I was a year and a half sober, somebody in Alcoholics Anonymous, I forgot to share with you guys that I thought I could never be a lawyer again once I had got sober, because I thought I had lost my license because I never paid my bar dues in the last couple of years. I know I'm a lawyer. Why do I have to pay dues? Right. So I thought I just lost that dream that I had of being Perry Mason. When I got sober, I was just going to do whatever jobs I could find. Somebody in the fellowship told me, I told you how fear grips me. They came up to me at the end of the meeting and said, Ronald, why don't you call the state bar and find out what's happening with your license? Living in fear in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. Instead of asking, I just disbar myself. I called up the state bar. They said, you haven't been disbarred. You've been suspended for non-payment of dues, $2,500. Pay the $2,500, you can get your license back. $2,500 sounded like $25,000, but it's amazing how much money you could save when you're not drinking. I saved half of every paycheck for the next 6 months, wrote a check for $2,500 to the state bar, got my bar card back. 2 months later, somebody in the fellowship says, isn't it time for you to apply for a job, Ronald, as a lawyer? Still living in fear, afraid of that gap in my resume. How can I put down Harbor Light, and then my sober living, Harmony Hall, bookkeeper, all the stuff I've been doing since I've been sober? What law firm? They told me, trust in God, Ronald. The first job I applied for was with the LA County Public Defender's Office. They asked me about the gap in my resume, and I told them I'm an alcoholic, that I've been sober for 2 years. They asked me if the stresses of the position might make me want to drink again. I said, sir, it was stressful when I was out there. I said, I think God has prepared me to do this job. And they looked at me, God, who was that? Is that a reference? They don't know. That's my best reference. They had me in for another interview 2 days later, and they hired me. In fact, they told me they would be proud to have me join their office. It's a miracle. After I've been a public defender for about 4 or 5 months, I was transferred to one of their offices in traffic court. And when I walked into that office, I saw at the file cabinet, there was this secretary with these fishnet stockings, some pumps, and a leather miniskirt. And I said, I must have her. We start this tempestuous affair in the office and stuff. And after about a year, I get her pregnant. And being a member of Alcoholics Anonymous, I don't want to be like my father. I want to be in the home with my child. So I asked her to marry me. Under those circumstances, I didn't know how long it was going to last. We hadn't known each other that long. This past May, we celebrated 35 years of marriage. She gave me a son, Ronald Jr., who I love. She had a 6-year-old daughter when we met named Terrence. It's very hard when you come into somebody's life early on. Sometimes the child thinks you're competing for their mom, and it was difficult, but I never called her my stepdaughter. I just put the steps in our relationship. When she graduated from high school, she introduced me to all of her friends as her dad. Terrence has had 4 kids who call me Papa. If anybody had asked me what I wanted out of Alcoholics Anonymous in the beginning, if they had asked me to make a list of the things that I wanted, Papa never would have made the list. Because you see, I can't dream big enough for what God has in store for me. I've had many Perry Mason moments in court. I was invited to the White House in Washington, D.C. when I was a public defender. Because of the work I was doing in my community. I started my own law office after having been a public defender for 12 years. I started sponsoring people in Alcoholics Anonymous. My life had really it was everything, but everything ain't peaches and cream in Alcoholics Anonymous. In 2014, I'm 28 years sober, sitting in the parking lot of my law office contemplating suicide. And I'm thinking of killing myself because I'm reading a letter from the State Bar of California telling me of their intent to disbar me. They're going to disbar me because I represented a client who had run off with $1 million of one of his investors' money. And I had the responsibility of watching him, making sure he used the money properly. And I didn't. I trusted him and I didn't do my job. And as a consequence of that, I'm losing my law license and I'm losing the dream. And I'm thinking, what are they going to think about me? And the very thing that we try to reduce in Alcoholics Anonymous when we get here is about to kill me, pride and ego. Because after you're here for a while and people pat you on the back and tell you what a great guy you are and look how well you're doing and stuff, I start reading my press clippings and I start thinking that if I'm going to lose that, I can't face you. In Bill's story, Bill writes something about what his friend Ebby told him when visiting him in Towns Hospital. He said, Ebby had told him, particularly was it imperative that I work with others as he had worked with me. For if an alcoholic failed to perfect and enlarge his spiritual life through work and self-sacrifice for others, he could not survive the certain trials and low spots ahead. And I don't know which person it was I might have sponsored, which person I gave a ride home to, which time I brewed up one of those big silver coffee pots, which time I'd opened the doors for a meeting. I don't know which thing it was I might have sacrificed over the course of those years that gave me God's grace in that moment. And I was able to make it home. And my wife didn't reject me and my mama didn't. She cried, but she says, God's got you. And my family said they didn't turn away from me. And the members in Alcoholics Anonymous did not turn away from me. My friend Polly Pistol told me, Ronald, there will be some people that talk about you in Alcoholics Anonymous, but not the ones that matter. That has been my story. After 2 years of unemployment, I started working again. I got a job on Skid Row, right around the corner from where I got sober, working with the homeless population. As a consequence of that job, I then got another job working at a treatment center. As a consequence of that job, I got another one, and each thing led to another. And God, because I didn't run away from Alcoholics Anonymous and hide, because I was able to live through the shame, live through all those feelings of it, and because you guys love me through it, I'm here to tell you that today, it is only by his grace that I'm able to stand in front of you. I only have 1 minute. I want to tell you a quick story. It might go a minute over. It might go 1 minute, but I got to tell you this. 4 days after I wanted to commit suicide, Ralph and I had to travel to Nashville, Tennessee for the Music City Roundup. We were going to be doing a workshop there, and I didn't want to go because I told you I just wanted to kill myself just 4 days before. And I didn't want to get on the plane, but thank God for trained feet. Thank God for commitments. I got on the plane in spite of my shame. And I'm sitting at breakfast the first morning with 2 dear friends in Alcoholics Anonymous. They let me use their names because this story is so important to me. Steve Lee and Kent Coleman. We're sitting to breakfast, Ralph and I'm sharing with them for the first time with somebody outside of I'm sharing with them what had happened, and I'm crying. And they're crying because they love me. And I'm sharing about how I'm sorry I've let you guys in Alcoholics Anonymous down. You supported me all these years. And then one of them shares about how they had gone through a bankruptcy in front of everybody, and they've been able to get through it. Another shares about how they had gotten out of a relationship, a bad relationship, in front of everybody. And but you know us, our stuff always seems so much worse. You don't understand, right? You know. And finally I cry out, but I'm so embarrassed. Who would ever want me to share again at a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous? That to get my license back was the best thing that ever happened. And one of them looked at me and he says, Ronnie, are you crazy? Don't you know in Alcoholics Anonymous, the more you fuck up your life, the more we want to hear your story? And they said, not because you messed it up, but what we want to know is, how did you not drink through that? How are you able to survive the worst moment of your life and not pick up? That's why I'm here tonight. I'm sharing that it is only by the grace of a loving God and the membership of Alcoholics Anonymous and my family and friends that I'm able to stand before you upright and let you know that God is, and God can, and God will. My name's Ronald. I'm an alcoholic.